Well, good afternoon. I'm here ironically, on National Clean Air Day, and I want to start out by acknowledging people who are dealing with the fires and smoke across Ontario, and in fact, across much of northeastern North America. 1 in 3 Canadians have experienced the effects of extreme weather, which means that everybody should be thinking about being prepared for extreme weather. I'm here to talk about another effect of extreme weather, and that is the effect on our electricity system. Now, in the last few days, a report by the North American Electricity Reliability Corporation, its summer reliability report, has attracted attention in the Ontario legislature. In that report, Ontario was singled out as the only province in Canada at risk of shortages of electricity. And there's a quote from the report: "Ontario has entered a period during which generation and transmission outages will be increasingly difficult to accommodate." What's new that I want to talk about today is that in this report, which I'll refer to as the NERC report, it uses a spring projection of Ontario temperatures. And the projection looks something like this. I'll just hold up a piece of paper. And as you can see, there's a big blue piece down here. And that is because the projection for spring temperatures across Ontario was for the temperatures to be below average. That projection was made in March. On May the 17th, this NERC report came out. On May the 31st, 2 weeks later, Environment Canada put out its projection for summer temperatures. And the projection for summer temperatures looks like this. It's higher temperatures than normal across the whole country and in much of the United States as well. And we share the electricity grid with the United States, so that's important. We need to be prepared on a social level. And we're going to have to develop this habit for years to come as we start to get used to hotter and hotter summers. And today I'm calling on the Ontario government to get ready, to prepare the public. Now, what are we getting ready for? Just to give you an example, last summer in early August, the Alexicon Energy, a local utility in Belleville, they asked residents in Belleville to, quote, reduce energy use, to avoid rotating blackouts. This is in the energy minister's own writing. And the question is, will people respond to these pleas to cut their consumption to protect the electricity system and to protect people like the elderly and the sick and the poor who depend on having electricity? What I'm concerned about is that when the energy minister publicly dismisses worries about reliability, and that's something we heard in the Ontario legislature in the last week or so, and asserts that our electricity system rates an A+, he undermines the ability to motivate the public to act in an emergency, action that may be needed to protect the lives of the elderly or the sick. So I'm calling on the energy minister to be forthright and to prepare the public to act in an emergency. The NERC report recommended several things. It recommended reviewing how the government communicates and how utilities communicate to consumers when there are potential electricity supply shortfalls, and preparing for actually efficiently reducing consumer demand with as little disruption as possible. Both of these things are harder if the minister is leading people to believe that there's nothing to worry about. I want to give a little bit of background. In 2018, when the Premier Ford's government came to power, Ontario had a small power surplus. However, the previous year, before they got elected, 2017, that was the year the last long-term energy plan was put out by the Government of Ontario. And that plan clearly projected that there would be a deficit, a gap between supply and demand, that electricity supply would fall in the mid-2020s. A lot of that is related to the Pickering nuclear reactor. The risk of shortages was increased by the Ford government's decision at the time to cut conservation programs, cancel renewable energy projects, and not invest in storage. There has been no update to the long-term energy plan since 2017. What's happening is that the independent electricity systems operator is doing the long-term planning. But I think that the government should have a long-term energy plan too, because the government's industrial policy, where we're converting a lot of industrial policies to electricity, the government's housing policy, which affects electricity supply and demand, and the government's transportation policies, which also affect the supply and demand of electricity. These should be coordinated with planning for the electricity system, and that's why it's so important to have a whole of government long-term energy plan. But this has not been done by the current government. I believe that the government should have spent the last 5 years recognizing the impending shortages and preparing, and instead they've left Ontarians vulnerable to outages. This year is the 20th anniversary of the 2003 blackout in the East. And I believe that the government is overconfident in the reliability of Ontario's grid in the face of extreme weather and in the face of what we know will be a hot summer this year.